Okay, take number 2. I decided not to go with take number 1 because it ended up being really long and rambly, and I just didn't like it that much. So if you want to see the 30-minute unabridged version, I'll link it in the description. Feel free to watch it if you want to watch for some reason. Okay. And if you haven't figured out what we're talking about based on the title, the chopping block, right? I'm going to be talking about 5 players who I think potentially could be cut from their NAL teams going into the next stage. So the transfer window doesn't actually open until after SI, so we won't know anything official until I think it's between February 21st and the 6th of March or something like that is when the window is open, so we won't know anything actual till then. Usually the community gets everything leaked, and so we'll basically know what's happening for most of the teams, I would imagine, before that. But okay, right, so let's talk about it. And okay, just a little bit of criteria. I'm going to pick one player from each of the bottom 5 placing teams in Stage 3 of the NAL. So that's going to be XSET, Beastcoast, Astralis, Mirage, and yes, TSM. And also keep in mind, like, a lot of this is just my opinion. Some of this is a combination of my opinion and just the raw stats, and then also community perception. So, you know, maybe deflect some of it off of me even. But yeah, I mean, if I talk about you, if you happen to watch this video and you don't like that much, I mean, I'm sorry. It's somewhat objective because I'm looking at stats here, but it's also just very not objective, i.e. subjective. So, I mean, just what's my opinion really matter, right? So, okay. Let's start with XSET here. All right, so their current roster stands at Creators, Razor, Filthy, Prod, and NVK. And Prod and NVK just joined this last stage, and I believe it was last stage Razor joined, so Creators and Filthy have been here the full year, but the other 3 players have only played in 1 or 2 stages. And okay, this is just the stage 3 stats I'm looking at right now, also keep in mind. So, right, just off the bat, you can see NVK definitely struggled. And for a lot of players on a lot of teams, the stats where they if they struggle on stats, it might be because they are playing a certain role. But NVK playing Sledge and Jaeger, you expect pretty good stats to be coming out from the player that you have on those roles. 9 and 12 on entry, not the worst ever, but I mean, not great. And then minus 27 is it's pretty poor. 0.71 rating. It's one of the lower for the stage. So okay, I think it's an easy pick of NVK here. Although I don't know that XSET needs to make a change. We'll see what happens in their relegation game, which, again, they do have to play without making roster moves. So sometime in December, they'll be playing against Parabellum, and the winner of that match will have a spot in the NAL 2022 season. And as I've mentioned in other videos, maybe Ubisoft will finally want to make the league a 10-team league, so they'll invite the other team, or maybe they want to invite a different team besides the loser of this match. Who knows? But okay, so it's possible that XSET could win their match, and it's possible that they could lose their match and still be in the league. Maybe. But okay. Do they need to make a change? Maybe also. Because, yes, they did get last place in this stage, but they seemed to be a team with a potentially brighter future than, say, Beastcoast. Beastcoast getting points against, I think it was Mirage, but then against XSET. So, right, they did lose to Beastcoast XSET, but I'm sort of the opinion that the result might have gone the other way if this wasn't a game early on in the season, if XSET had a little bit more time to find their footing. And you could say the same thing about Beastcoast. They also picked up 2 new players, but I think based on the players that they picked up and just the status of the roster and all this stuff, that Beastcoast had the upper hand a little bit. So if it had been maybe in the middle of the season or late in the season, I think that XSET might have won that match, especially considering the performance they put on against other teams. They almost took Space Station to overtime. They beat Sonics, and they had respectable performances against some of the other top teams. Whereas like Beast Coast just got crushed by pretty much all of the top teams. But beating two of their closest opponents in the standings, being Mirage and XSET. And okay, right. So I am gonna go with MVK, but maybe he deserves another chance. He proved himself in the past to be a really good player. He was one of the most revered, entry players, slayers, whatever you want to call it, in the world for a time when he was on EG, and he played on the second best roster in the world for a time, also EG. So, dude definitely has a lot of potential, and maybe he just hasn't lived up to it, or maybe he just can't hang anymore. So we'll have to see what happens with him. Might get dropped, might get another chance. I would like to see him get another chance, because just one bad stage is really, it'd be tough to go out on. So, okay. Otherwise, I think Creators is good, and Razor probably good. Prod, the next worst on stats, but he's playing Hibana, he's IGL, he's playing support IGL. And then Filthy, he kind of bossed up this stage. I think maybe Filthy might be next after NVK, but that's not really what I'm here to talk about. So I guess I'll just glance back at the other two stages as well, but it's not terribly important for XSET because they've had several roster moves. So, you know, Razor, Creators, not great stats. Filthy, the lowest on the team from this stage that is still on the team. And then back here, it's only Filthy and Creators, and they're just kind of here in the middle. So yeah, I'll stick with MDK as my pick for XSET's member on the chopping block. And okay, we'll talk about Mirage next, since I just have them right next to them, or I guess because CGG does. Okay, so this is from stage 1. Let's go back to stage 3. Right, so Dream, Loading, Thomas, Benji, and Nyx makes up the current Mirage roster. So Dream put up pretty good numbers for this stage, especially considering he's their hard breach and smoke player. I think maybe some of the IGLing duties go to Dream. I know Nyx is the primary IGL, but I think Dream has the ability to do so and maybe does some amount of calling. And then also Thomas, considering he was the IGL back on XSET, but I don't think he's the IGL now. And okay, the structure of this team just strikes me as very odd these days. Benji not doing that much entry, or at least not getting involved in that. Maybe he intended to, but he didn't actually get involved in that many opening engagements. Less than Thomas, less than Loading, less than Nyx. And so I guess you'd say Nyx is on the primary entry, which I think is known. But then it's like, who is it? You know, I guess it's Thomas as the other one. I mean, especially playing Ashe, and he played a lot of Yana as well. But I don't know why Loading has so many. Maybe a lot of these are from defense or something. I'm not sure why. And he's sort of in a supportish role. Kaid and Thatcher, not the most support characters, especially considering you just sort of throw your stuff and move on with the match a lot of the time. But okay, so who is my pick here? I think I'm gonna go with Nyx, and a lot of this is to do with the community's opinions. A lot of people do want to see Nyx replaced by, and maybe Thinking Nade now that he's looking for a team again. But I think people want to see Thomas IGLing, and I think a lot of people also want to see Dream trying his hand at entry. They've said that about him since he was on Tempo Storm. It was like him and Butters and Creators and Mark and Crazy. It was something like that. And Sloppy was on there at some point. Maybe Butters replaced him. I don't recall exactly. But and back on the roster, generally the two standout players were Dream and Creators, and Dream on the support, Creators on the entry. But people noticed Dream's mechanics and whatnot and thought he might be a good entry player. And it still remains to be seen because he is still playing support. So, you know, maybe just a support player at heart, or maybe nobody's ever had the balls to put him on entry. So, right, if Nyx was dropped, he could be put on entry along with, you know, whichever other player. I guess all of them have the capacity to do it, considering Benji did in the past, and Loading and Thomas seem to be doing it to some extent now. And yeah, Nyx just has put up poor stats, and the IGL argument can only go so far. I mean, I get that you expect to have worse stats as an IGL than not as an IGL, everything else the same, but I mean, just how poor of stats Nyx puts up for the roles he's playing, for playing Sledge and Mozzie. Like, he's just sort of free roaming on defense a lot of the time, and he's you know, primary or secondary entry, usually on attack. Yeah, you definitely expect better numbers, and he had some good games, and he did go even on entry, you know, props to him for that. But he did go heavily negative on the kills, and his cost was rather low, and his KPR was low as well, and his survival was abysmal. So, right, I don't know that this team also needs anything to change, but their results definitely dipped after Hot and Cold left. You know, they got 3rd place in the first stage, and then they dropped to 7th place in the second stage, and then they got 6th place this stage. It seems like they're maybe steadily climbing back. They, you know, if a couple things had gone differently for them in this last stage, just a few things, not very many things, they could have gone to the major and they could have qualified for SI already. Of course, they have another chance to qualify in the closed qualifiers, but you know, if things had just gone a little bit differently for them, they could have already qualified, but they didn't. And do their roles need to change? Maybe they just need more time with Thomas on the roster. Of course, that 5th slot on the team has been rotating. Dream, Loading, Benji, and Nyx have been here all year, but it was Hot and Cold, then it was Quartz, and then now it's Thomas. So maybe they need a player change, maybe, and not in that last slot perhaps, or maybe they just need a role switch up, or maybe they just need more time to, you know, hone their skills and whatnot. So hard to say. I'll go with Nyx, and I guess we'll just examine the stats. And you see Nyx on the bottom here again. Here's Quartz, you know, the player that they dropped. slightly above Nyx, but he was on Sledge and Goyo and stuff, and not great stats. But it seemed like Quartz probably could have been given another chance as well. This was his first Pro League stage. I technically played in the Canadian division when it was separated from the US division, when it was Canada and US separately. And I think technically that might have been labeled T1, but it wasn't really, right? So, maybe give Quartz another stage. It's not like his performance was that bad. And then Dream, loading, Benji. And here you see Benji actually not quite even entry, I guess, this stage either, because it was Nyx and Quartz. But maybe I'm misremembering this. But no, yeah, in the first stage, he definitely did more than he did in the other stages. But here it is hot and cold and Nyx. So I don't know why Benji is not playing entry. If he plays Zofia all the time, maybe they think that Zofia needs to stay alive for the utility, but I always find it odd when teams are putting their Sledge in the like primary position. I feel like that's one of the last operators that you want to lose. Obviously you need your hard breach most of the time, but after your hard breacher, I feel like Sledge is probably the one you want to die least. But I suppose there are a lot of positions where you need to use the frag grenades to clear out players or utility or whatever, so you need them on the front line to do that. But yeah, I don't know. It's just a little bit of a tangent, I suppose. Loading definitely got better after the first stage. He was probably one of the worst players in stage 1, and then he improved. But you see Nyx 4th here, and then 5th, and this stage 2 again, and this stage 3 again. So I think if anybody is on the chopping block, it's Nyx, but also keep in mind that as an IGL, his contributions to his team go unseen by everyone except for his teammates. So, maybe I'm just talking out of my ass here, but just based on the stats and I guess the community's opinion at large, which probably is not always the best thing to base things off of. But okay, with all that being said, I'm going to pick Nyx for Mirage, and then let's move on to Astralis here. Okay, J90, Iconic, DP Fire, Retro, and Shuttle make up the current Astralis roster. And before I talk about them too much otherwise, I suppose I should mention the role swap they had recently, which a lot of people are questioning quite a bit. They don't know why it happened. And I mean, it didn't seem to work out for them. So let me just say what it is really quick. Retro and Shuttle switched attack roles. So Shuttle in the past was their flank watch player and Retro was the hard breach player. And now it's the other way around. Lion being often a flank watch operator, but I think Retro is playing Nomad sometimes too. And then Shuttle plays Habana, maybe plays Thermine or something other times. But anyways, Shuttle on breach, Retro on flank watch, and Retro generally had the lowest stats on the team all the time before, and it makes sense if you are the smoke hard breach player, and now his stats, I suppose, are a little better than Shuttle's, and he's on flank watch, so it makes a little bit of sense. But their results as a team, they went from 4th place in stage 1 to 5th place in stage 2, barely missing out on top 4. Just came down to that last match that they played against the Sonics. If they won that, they would have been top 4 and gotten the major. That's not what happened. And then in this last stage here, they really struggled, and they found themselves in 7th place, right? Right, so 4th, 5th, 7th. So not great. The trajectory is especially bad. I suppose they still never got passed up by Beastcoast or XSET, but it was looking like it might happen throughout the stage, but it didn't in the end. So does this team need a change? Maybe. I do think that this 5-player roster has potential to be a top 4 team. I mean, they technically were in stage 1, but I don't give stage 1 that much weight, because things were really weird in stage 1. Just teams were getting the hang of things. Like Space Station was just like not good because of the whole thing with Canadian leaving, and now they're just undisputed the best team in NAL, and just a lot of weird factors. Hot and Cold was on Mirage, all this stuff. So I think stage 2 and stage 3, and also because they're more recent than stage 1, but I think they need to be given a lot more gravity. So okay, 5th place and 7th place in the last 2 stages. And okay, so let's talk about the players a little bit more in depth. J90 has, I think, proven himself to be one of the more underrated players in the league, and maybe he's not even underrated anymore. Maybe people just know he's good now, but I think for a while he was flying under the radar, and his performance throughout the year, he, at least statistically, been one of the better players. And let me actually take a look. What roles was he playing in the first? Right, he was playing Ace and Smoke. He was playing Hard Breach and Smoke, and then in the second stage, he's on Sledge and Kaid, so sort of switch to the Sledge role on attack, but still sort of support op on defense, but not the Smoke. And then now Sledge Jaeger. So, and here he is at the top of the team, and one of the better performers from the whole league, doing a lot of entry. And yeah, he seems to have come into his own. Solid player, perhaps the best player on the team. Iconic, pretty good numbers throughout the year. I think maybe a little bit worse than maybe he expected or the community expected based on his performance last year when he was on the Sonics, but still pretty solid numbers overall. TP Fire, I think, let me look. Was he the highest rated player on? No. He did okay in stage 2. He was in the middle of his team. But he, you know, it was plus 17, plus 2, did a lot of entry and stuff. Pretty good anyways. This was his rookie season, and then now just slightly negative rating here. And the whole ratings thing, there is a lot of disparity here. I mean, from the top to the bottom, it's quite the wide range. And I think DP Fire is doing his job well. He plays pretty aggressively, and he's successful a good amount of the time. He's right around even, and all things considered, not bad for his team being, 7th place in the league. So this leaves Retro and Shuttle. And okay, so Shuttle, maybe you could imagine it's him based on the fact that he's really fallen off, but it really seems to be because of the whole role switch. I'm not sure who is the IGL anymore. I thought it was Retro before, but my understanding now is that it was never Retro, and it was maybe Shuttle before, and then Iconic took over, and I don't know actually who is IGLing now. So, right, the 2 veterans on the team, Retro and Shuttle, who have been playing for a really long time, and then J90 and Iconic, they're not new anymore. They've been playing for like 2 years in at the top level, or like a year and a half or whatever, but DB Fire is still pretty new. But Retro and Shuttle, many years they've been playing on many rosters, and you'd think that they'd be a really strong leadership presence, and maybe they are, but maybe just not a strong leadership voice. Retro seems like a quiet guy, and my understanding is back in the day Shuttle was as well, maybe not so much anymore. But again, with the whole IGL confusion, with the whole role swap thing, and also I'm going to incorporate the community's opinions. Lots of people think Retro should be dropped here, and my understanding is that he was supposed to be dropped, and this might just be rumors that actually are not true at all. But when Canadian was looking for a team before he decided to go with Dark Zero, I think it was Astralis that he was, and I guess they were Disrupt at the time, but he was supposed to join this roster and presumably replacing Retro. So, and that would make sense. He could play kind of support. He could, maybe J90 goes back to the smoke. I don't know that Canadian plays a lot of smoke, but on SSG he would play Breach, and that's where Retro was playing at the time. Not now, but so they tried this role swap thing. Maybe they'll just switch back because just consider it a failed experiment. It didn't work. But yeah, we'll have to see. And I'm gonna pick Retro for Astralis, and let's just confirm things with the stats going back. So yeah, Retro, the worst, not by far, but there's a pretty wide margin between him and like the middle of the team. Just a little gap here, and then a pretty big gap here. But once again, do keep in mind he is playing Thermite and Smoke, like the 2 operators that you expect probably the lowest rating on. And then here's stage 2, and once again, down here by a pretty big margin, but the same sort of operators. So it's not terribly easy to pick, but I think if I have to pick one for the team, and based on the performance of the other players, I gotta go with him. And especially, maybe if it wasn't for this big performance, Shuttle might be more in the running, but he had a killer performance stage 1 when he was on his Lion, on his bullshit here. Okay, so that'll be for Astralis, and next I'm gonna move on to Beastcoast. All right, Beastcoast, Sippin, Young Alec, Anthony, Jay, and Fozo. Jay and Young Alec just joined for this last stage, and Sippin and Fozo and Anthony, actually, all 3 of them have been around for the entire of the 2021 season. So Young Alec looked like he might be an absolute star coming into the stage, and then even in the first play day, he was kind of dunking on XSET. But by the end of the stage, I mean, not too hot, and none of the players on this roster have very hot of stats. I guess Sippin, okay KD, but very negative on entry. Young Alec, kind of negative on KD, and then even on entry, and these are sort of the 2 entry players. And then, all right, Anthony, Jay, Fozo. So Fozo is one of the more consistent players on the planet in that he got last place in the NAL all 3 stages. Unfortunate, hate to see it. It is what it is. Almost a 0.5 KD, just 1 death short of it, and poor entry. I don't know why Castle's his most played operator. I guess that's just the way things broke down. It doesn't seem like anyone would play Castle that much, but he must play just a ton of operators so that Castle is the most played. And then he's, of course, their flank watch on attack. I mean, it's an easy pick here, right? You pick Fozo, and just based on the stats, based on how bad his stats have been, I mean, let's look at the other 2 stages. Here's stage 2, 0.68, and here's stage 1, 0.69. He never broke even a 0.7 rating. And I mean, it speaks for itself. Unfortunately, it's just it's pretty poor. Like maybe if it happened the one stage, maybe even if it happened the second stage, and then he had a big redemption in the third stage, but it was not the case. And so easy pick there. I guess I'll talk about the other players really quickly. Anthony, let's go back to stage 1 here, was their best player, not by a wide margin, but he was also playing a lot of smoke on defense and sledge on attack. And then second stage, also their highest rated player, and now he's just playing full support. He's playing breach and smoke, so maybe he flourishes more on just the straight up support, because in his sledge stage is not as good. This is back to stage 3. And my understanding is that he played sledge even back in Challenger League, and that he was not that hot on it, so maybe they just need to restructure their roles. I don't know who they would put on it otherwise, maybe a replacement. Maybe thinking they could go here, but I don't want to talk about that sort of thing too much. That is just straight up conjecture. Right, so Sippin's been okay throughout the year, so is Anthony. Jay, pretty poor stats here, like really poor, but he is the hard support IGL, and it's his first stage in tier 1 play, so give him a bit of a break, and we're gonna roll with Fozo. And okay, so now let's move on to the big dog. Let's talk about TSM. All right, this has to be the most controversial part of the video because the NAL has a pretty clearly defined bottom 4 at this point, and thus clearly defined top 5, with the bottom 4 being the teams I just talked about, and the top 5 being Space Station, Sonics, Oxygen, Dark Zero, and TSM. And then maybe the top 3 even you could separate a little bit: Oxygen, Space Station, and Sonics. They've been a little bit above the other 2. Dark Zero and TSM have both had their struggles. I suppose Oxygen technically did in the second stage, but overall throughout the course of the year, points wise and everything, they're up there. Okay, so we're gonna talk about TSM. Part of it is because I don't want to talk about Dark Zero, because they just had the Canadian role swap, and there's just this sort of precedent that people love to bring up about how Dark Zero is always slow to get things rolling again when they make a roster move. I was really surprised by the performance in Sweden. I thought they would have been at least some amount better given how well they did in Mexico, and they just switched out one player, and BC was almost sort of a sub, and he played for like the same amount of time with that roster as Canadian did. Like they both played in their respective stage 2 and 3, and then they played at the majors. But Dark Zero got pwned at Sweden, and at Mexico they at least made playoffs. So right, it surprised me, and so I don't want to talk about that too much. We'll talk about TSM, and maybe because it's a little bit easier to pick, and because all of these players are in here for a long time. But please don't be furious or whatever if I pick your favorite guy. So it is what it is. All right. Who's it gonna be here? So, right, achieved really good stats this stage. He really popped off. I think maybe freeing him from the IGL shackles have unleashed his true potential. And in the past, he put up really impressive numbers as well, but just not the recent past. We'll go back to stage 2 here. Gotta go up to TSM, right? Achieved, he was their lowest rated player, but they were also the second place team, so low rating doesn't really matter that much. I guess you missed out on first place, but I mean, who was going to stop Space Station? Okay, so going back to stage 1, achieved actually their highest rated player. So yeah, going back not even that far, just even a whole 0.1 above Merc here. And right, so I'm not going to go with achieved. He just seems like a killer entry player. Mozzie, Sledge just really flourishes on those aggressive roles, and hopefully we'll see him continue to do so. And okay, I guess I should mention, since I did for Astralis, the role change that these guys had as well. So just like Shuttle and Retro switch roles on attack, Geo and Chala sort of switch roles. So it does say Maverick here, but I think Geo was still playing a lot of the time Flank Watch, and Chala was playing Hard Breach, where it was the other way around in the past. But now, yeah, Chala, you can see, Thermite, Smoke, just the classic support operator picks. Pretty poor stats, almost a 0.5 KD, not really involved in entry, but he did get a lot of plants down, and from what I understand, at some point in the season, they switched IGLs. It was achieved before, and then Charlotte took over, so he is now their hard support IGL, so you do have to, at that point, cut the dude a little bit more slack and the whole role switch thing. So, okay, let's take a look at his stats. Let's go back to stage 2. Chala, actually their highest rated player. He was killing it when Frost still had the 1.5, and then on his trusty Nomad, and then back in stage 1, right in the middle, which is about probably what you expect from your Flank Watch player. And then keep in mind, he's also playing Smoke on defense, so that generally hurts your stats some amount. He's still playing a lot of Smoke here, but he just played more Frost. And then in the stage, it's back to Yeah, back to smoke on defense. Okay, so let's talk about Bolo. You know, reasonably, Bolo is not going to get dropped unless he just goes absolutely terrible mode. And then even then, maybe not, because just being such a big content creator, an org such as TSM, I'm sure values that greatly. But he is still a good player. It just certainly has not been his year, though. 0.99, 1.11. It's a decent performance. You know, this is not bad. And then in the first stage, the lowest rated player. So I think by Bolo standards, not great, but by normal standards, it's okay. Just his year's performance as a whole. And okay, maybe I'll talk about Mexico a little bit, because these guys actually were in Mexico, but not Merc, and that's perhaps very important. So Merc was not able to attend Mexico, and I think maybe there could possibly be some amount of animosity. It's not really his fault that he couldn't, but there could be animosity among the roster, and so I guess I'll address the fact that there were rumors, and again, maybe nothing more than rumors, or maybe it was based on some amount of truth, that Merc was supposed to be dropped after stage 2, so going into this stage that we just had, stage 3, but it didn't happen. So maybe they couldn't go through with the replacement, or they couldn't find a replacement, or it was just straight up cap, and that actually was not going to happen. But people were talking about it, and look, Merc, if you watch the dude, if you spectate him, he seems like his mechanics are crazy. Like he probably one of the most mechanically skilled players in North America, maybe in the world. He just looks really good, but his numbers just don't. He just rarely goes crazy, and when he does go crazy, it's usually balanced out by him putting up poor stats. You know, so 1.06, not the worst, but as your entry player, I mean, Jaeger and Finka, I think you expect a little bit better. Plus 12 is okay, but he did go pretty heavily negative on entry here. And we'll go back to stage 2. Merc is their second lowest rated player, and he put up good entry numbers here, but his rating overall is pretty low. And in this stage, again, it's like it's positive, you know, positive here, you went even here, but it's just like it's pretty mediocre. So I guess if I have to pick one for TSM, which I don't have to, but I sort of have to, because I said I would at the beginning of the video, right? I would go with Merc, and I think if not Merc, then Geo. There's also a little bit of drama going on, and maybe this is just like the community being super dumb, but I think it was Chalo was reported to have said something about Geo not speaking that good of English, and that's why they had the role swap, but I think his English is actually fine, and maybe it was just like some dumb shit that somebody said, or just like somebody blew something way out of proportion. I don't know what the deal with it is actually, but yeah, Geo's numbers haven't been great, but he has, you know, he plays a lot of support. He does play a lot of Jaeger on defense, which is something, but he has played Breach throughout the year, mostly. Back in stage 2, he didn't play that much, so these numbers are a little bit skewed. Of course, he only played 3 games, so keep that in mind. But I mean, over the course of those 3 games, the stats are pretty good. And then in stage 1 here, slightly negative, but playing Breach on attack, you expect pretty bad stats. And then Jaeger, I don't know what percent of the time he actually plays Jaeger. I guess it's his most played operator, and it is like every stage. I think a lot of times they'll put him in that early confrontation position, like say top of library stairs on Chalet behind a shield, play Jaeger there, that sort of thing. And so that's just the first thing that attackers are going to actively contest, and so you get a kill there, or you die there, or you fall back, or whatever happens. But okay, so maybe Geo, but I'm gonna go with Merc for the variety of reasons that I mentioned before. And of course, TSM being the good roster, the strong roster that they have historically been, I think they're probably the least likely to make a change of any of the teams, but it could happen. We'll see how their SI, I guess the SI quals go for them, because they are not qualified, but they are auto-invited to the North American close qualifier, so they are already in the final 4, I guess, for quals. They are definitely the favorite to win it, and then we'll see how things go for them at SI. If they have a really abysmal performance at SI, or I guess especially if they don't even make it to SI, then they'll probably be a lot more likely to look for roster moves. And okay, so with all that being said, I guess that's going to do it for the video. If you have any comments, if you think I picked the wrong players, let me know. If you have any strong opinions on maybe other players I didn't talk about from the other teams, but I think those teams are much less in need of a roster move, especially the top 3. And okay, if you think I'm crazy for any of that, whatever. But if you enjoy this type of content, give me a like, give me a sub. And also if you have recommendations for similar videos, or maybe even kind of different videos, but you know, Siege videos, if there's something you want to see in particular, let me know in the comments. And okay, with all of that being said, I will catch you in the next video.